A little while back on the ScotsCare podcast, we spoke to actor Duncan Pow. Our chat covered a whole host of topics, his life and career to date, but also the role he played as Sergeant Melshi in Rogue One, a Star Wars story. What he wasn't able to speak about at the time was the fact that he had reprised that role for Disney's Rogue One prequel show, Andor. It turns out Andor has been brilliant. So we thought we'd try and get Duncan back for a ScotsCare podcast Andor special. Being an absolutely top human being, Duncan instantly said yes, and he joins us now from Malta, where he's filming his next project.
ScotsCare.
Hi Duncan.
Hiya.
Thank you for coming back and doing this.
Thank you for having me back.
Now you're in Malta at the moment. How's the weather?
Today is it's a little like the weather in Britain. Some days it's really nice, and then all of a sudden it's pouring down with rain. Today it's kind of grey, but it's okay.
Can you talk about what you're filming at the moment?
I'm filming at the moment a drama series, a 4-part drama for British television called Under Her Skin.
Can you talk about who else is in it?
Yes, well, I hope so. I hadn't planned to. So also in it, I'm working alongside Rachel Shenton and Joe Joyner.
Oh, lovely. Okay.
So yeah, it's a great cast. It's directed by Adrian McDowell. The scripts are great. The cast is great. It's been a brilliant experience. So I'm super hopeful it will be as well received as it has been enjoyed as a job.
Well, when you first came on the ScotsCare podcast, we spoke about everything really. We kind of went through the gamut, and it was kind of before Andor was released. So we spoke a little bit about Rogue One. Mm-hmm. Then when we released the podcast, it was hugely successful. It went right up into the top 10 in Britain. You were number 3 in Korea. You charted in Canada, Australia, Japan. And you know, I'm not a big Twitter user, but the reaction on Twitter kind of blew me away. And we sat down at the charity and said, we got to see, if Duncan's not too busy, if you'll do an Andor special where we dig a bit deeper and mainly talk about Andor. So thanks for coming back and doing this.
Well, as I say, thanks for having me back. I remember when we spoke the last time, we turned off the interview and I went, well, this is kind of what I've been up to without wanting to share too much. So I'm super happy that the last time we spoke, it's been, so well received all around the world. And, you have to put that down to the Star Wars fans who are, the best fans of any franchise, I think, that has ever been. So
I remember, now I'm slightly older than you, but I remember queuing around the outside of the Odeon in Glasgow in 1977. Me and my pal Sean Rankin and his dad took us there to see Star Wars A New Hope. Were you a fan right from the beginning? So your first one must have been Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I was I was trying not to react because I was born in 1977. So I was thinking of you queuing and I was thinking of me being born. Yeah, so my first, when we moved to Lockerbie, which must have been, I would say, in 1981, maybe 1981 or 1982. The first film I remember going to see at the cinema in Lockerbie, which was goodness me, I can't remember the year this must have been, but it was The Empire Strikes Back. That was the first film I went to see at the cinema in Lockerbie. I went to see many other films there, but that's my. I remember I had been to a cinema before, but it doesn't stick in the mind. But I do remember that vividly. It was such I can't even put it into words what it was like to sit and watch. And if you go back and revisit the films, they still hold. But imagine being a kid and that being your first cinema experience that you can remember. For me was it changed everything, didn't it?
Well, it did, and I think for both of us then. Moving forward, we have grown up with Star Wars in our life all the time. And as you said right at the beginning, Star Wars fans, they're so loyal. And I know, because I've watched a lot of stuff that you're in, Duncan, and you put your heart and soul into every role. But do you feel a duty of care to the brand when you went into Rogue One or when you went into Andor and realizing this is kind of taking it up a level?
Yeah. So, do you know, I think I mentioned the last time we spoke, I try not to think too much about it, because I think if I did, it would, that kind of pressure is not something you need, I think, when you're performing. However, for me to be involved and to be a part of both Rogue One and now Andor, first of all, in hindsight, I can say it's a great responsibility. It's a huge responsibility, because you are becoming a part of a universe that is visceral. It's something that's lived by many people around the world. And so it's something that's really, really important to the fan base, first of all, but also, to tell the story of the characters, and to give them something that they feel is truthful and honest. It's a huge responsibility, but it's something that you only realize what it is you've done in hindsight. So both when I watch Rogue One and when I have sat and watched the series, the Andor series, it's only then, and even now, hasn't quite sunk in what it is that I've been a part of. I don't know if it ever will.
This might be an impossible question, but if you had done Andor before you did Rogue One, do you think you'd have played the Rogue One part any differently?
That's a very good question. Well, I think the first thing when I went in on Rogue One is you are playing the part of someone who is willing to give their life for something they believe in. And I think, all the way throughout history, there have been people on, whichever side you want to put it, there have been human beings on this earth that have been willing to die for a cause, be that something we perceive to be not a good cause, and also something that we might perceive to be a good cause. But the type of human being that it takes to give their life for something greater than themselves, for me, is a very specific mindset and way to live. Now I understand that a little, but I think so. To go in on Rogue One and to play, that all happened so fast for me. But the thing that was underneath all of it was, here's a man who's willing to do anything for the cause, and that's what I tried to give in the months that I was involved in that production. So with Andor, I think for me was more interesting, because all of a sudden you're then presented with a storyline, an arc that is, hey, let's find out how this guy became someone who is prepared to give his life for a cause. And I don't think I would have played it differently. I think what we're doing with Andor is we're finding out how not just Melshi, but also Cassian and many of the other characters. We're finding out the things in their backstory, the things they sacrificed, the things they learned, the things that made them into people who were prepared to live their life and give sacrifice in a very particular way. So I don't know if I would have played it differently, is the answer. It was a long answer to a short question.
No, it's a good answer. Because what I thought worked tremendously well in Andor, and I think it's something that's really difficult to pull off, is that by the very nature of it being a prequel to Rogue One, I knew you had to escape from that prison because I knew where you had to go. But I became so lost in the characters. And especially the thing that came across with the Sergeant Melshi character was his desperation and the resignation of Melshi at points that he thought he was never getting out there.
Yes. Well, I think well, the same. I remember reading the scripts, knowing that, of course, that he goes on. But I felt the same. Like I felt, how's it going to happen? Okay, because we find out bit by bit. That was the first thing. How's it going to happen? But yeah, I think the thing with Melshi and you know, Tony Gilroy and I had spoken several times, and he you know, we've spoken all the way since Rogue One, so about 6 years, you know, we've been in conversation. So he knows me a little, and I know him a little, you know. We and I enjoy the conversations we have, and you know, to try and convey what it is that he's trying to write, because the writing is just it's a gift for an actor to be involved with. But he said, you know, he knows a little bit about me, as I say, in the sense of, you know, I'm a practicing Buddhist. I live my life a particular way. I try and think a particular way. And he said to me, there's a little bit of you in Melshi, in the sense that he's already free. And that was interesting to me, because, you know, you call it resignation. And the way Tony conveyed it was, it's freedom. You know, he's not in a prison, because in his mind, he's already free. You know, he doesn't believe what's going on. He doesn't buy into this story they're being told by this, you know, mythical voice that tells them what to do and when to do it. He's not buying into the idea that they're getting let out at any time. And so, well, you can call it resignation, or you can call it acceptance.
Yeah.
I think, you know, as a human being, Melshi has been, I almost think there's been other people that have come in to that prison. Melshi's been waiting for someone like Cassian to appear. And when he does, it's almost like that spark of hope. Here's someone else who doesn't buy what it is that we're being told, and someone else who's willing, really. And there's the scene, and I don't want to spoil it if people haven't seen the series yet, but the scene where there's a line that says, as this whole thing unfolds in episode 10, where I'm just gonna assume I'm already dead. And well, let's say that's if you know, the whole thing that we've got in common as human beings here is we are, all of us, going to die. It's going to happen. So the trick is, can we, which is, you know, the complete letting go of everything, you know, of the body, everything that we've done, all of our achievements, all of our friends, everything disappears when we go. So is it possible for us then to try and do that every day, every moment, you know, to die to the past, to what it is that we're accumulating? And does that kind of daily or momentary death, bit by bit, does it bring about a certain freedom? And I would say, yes, it does. And I think that's the thing with Melshi in that prison, is that, you know, of all the people in the prison, he's the one who's already free.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's quite a stoic way to look at it, you know, so from that kind of stoicism. And I think one of the things that really sets apart Andor from the likes of Obi-Wan or the Boba Fett spin-off, and I think why it appealed to me far greater in my personality, was it was darker. It was almost sinister in places, and there was a much slower pace, which made it like a thriller, which was very different from Star Wars. And for the first time in my mind, it was really character driven.
Yes, I agree with you. I think this is the thing when we're talking about, you know, this is 12 episodes in season 1, which allows for, you know, this sort of long form storytelling. And the thing that drives all of us as human beings is, first of all, is desire. But the way the desire manifests is through words and action. And I think with what I found on Andor, both being a part of it and watching it, is the dialogue. And that's the thing that drives us forwards, is the conversations. And yeah, it's for me, it's unique. And I think for me as well, this is the entrance to everything that comes afterwards, you know, because this leads into Rogue One, which leads into A New Hope. This story is the almost like a backwards beginning of 1977 of A New Hope. So this is the feed in, and I think because that's the case, isn't it more interesting to develop as Cassian, as Andor develops, you know, because he goes from being this you know, mercenary, not a nice guy, you know, yes. And you know, he's a thief, and to follow his journey from that beginning, what is it that turns him from a thief to someone who we see in Rogue One, who's prepared to sacrifice his life for the rebellion, for that cause, and so that's what's interesting, because, you know, you're right, we've not had it before, but isn't it right that the entrance into this gigantic story, which is, you know, what, 30 to my sums now, 45 years old.
Yeah.
You know, the same, I don't need to do the sums, I was born the same year. 45-year-old story, you know, is
35 years old.
I like being old. So this magnificent story that spanned 45 years, isn't it great that the entrance into it is based and guided in this beautiful story, character, dialogue development? You know, it's great that we've got at the center of this, you know, Tony Gilroy, who's for me one of the greatest storytellers, you know, that's of the last, you know, 40-50 years himself, to be telling this story, and the way that it's being told. Yeah, I mean, I hear you, I agree with you. You know, I'm trying to put a kind of sentiment to it with words, but I could have just said, 100%. Yeah. It's as it should be.
ScotsCare, helping to break the cycle of deprivation for Scots in London.
I think the complexity and the nuance of Andor obviously appeal to a massive audience, because, you know, 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I read another review, it was called a masterpiece. You must have been delighted, because The Mandalorian was great. Other spin-offs that have come out have had not such great reviews. So, you know, to get 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, you must have thought, yes, we are doing something right here.
Well, first of all, I posted the new thing on Instagram. It's 96% now. So,
was it?
Yeah, so it's 96%. I think that the beauty of this is you don't need to have seen Star Wars you don't need to have seen any of them to be able to watch it. You know, I've been watching it with my girlfriend, and she's never seen a Star Wars, and she was like super excited to see the next one. You know, my mum as well, who, of course, she's probably seen a Star Wars, but not through her own volition. Has she gone, right, I'm off to the cinema to see a Star Wars, and she's been blown away by it. She couldn't wait for the next episodes. So all of a sudden, there's a different audience that are coming to watch and actually enjoying the show, as for you know, the idea that that I'm doing good, I was the guy that won the lottery. You know, for me, I come in and I'm a part of this, in as much that I've been asked to come back and to be a part of it. But in reality, I feel like my job is the easiest job there. You know, the work that has gone into that show, from the costumes to the locations to the designers to the writers to the producers, the execs, everybody involved with it.
Now, do you know what? I do want to come on to that, because that struck me. The whole scale of Andor struck me as it was motion picture size. But do you know what I want to do first, Duncan? I want to kind of go back, because I listened back to the last time we chatted, and I asked you how Rogue One came about for you. So we're kind of going back to the end, you know. And I listened back to, we put out a clip, which again was very popular, and you said it was mystical and unfathomable how that. But could you kind of expand on that for us? In 2015, 2016, you were busy at that time. You were doing quite a lot of other work. So can you tell us in actual real terms, did someone call you? Did you go for an audition? Because you had said you weren't in it till there was rewrites. So explain it for us in layman's terms.
Well, it all happened through a chance conversation, really. I'd been involved in the production from right at the start. Gina J's office, who had done the casting for Rogue One, I was kind of helping out. This was this was, goodness me, 2014, 2015. You know. And it was after I'd lost my sister, and I'd been down in Somerset, and I was thinking of giving up acting. I was thinking of just saying, you know, I'm kind of finished with all of this. I was trying to find meaning in life, if I'm honest with you, or trying to certainly, maybe not find meaning, but certainly find, if, you know, in a world of so much suffering, you know, who am I? What am I doing? Why am I here? It was a time of great reflection. And I'd been down in Somerset for a year. Like I say, I moved down there after we lost my sister, and I was down there amongst family. And all of a sudden I had this, something happened, was a very personal revelation. And I felt very strongly, I just had this feeling that I need to go back and I need to continue acting. It was something my sister Lindsay loved. It was her whole life, and I had a sign, call it a sign, that was what I should be doing with my life, or at least certainly a part of it. So I wrote loads of I wrote letters to in fact I sent emails with my showreel to every casting director that I'd never met in the UK. And I think one of the only ones that replied was Gina J, and Gina J is you know, one of the biggest casting directors in the UK. And she started having me in for stuff. I went and I actually helped out with some of the original camera tests for Rogue One, and yeah. I was in and around the production doing all sorts of different things, and then when the reshoots came, I got into a conversation one day, bizarrely, about Buddhism and about chanting with Tony, and then I went off to Italy, and I was in Italy working with a healer from South America, who said to me, you know, you need to come back and come to the jungle again with me. And I told him, I don't have any money. And he said, oh, it's okay, you're going to get a job, and when you get back to the UK. And I was thinking to him, well, you know, I've not had any auditions. I don't quite know how it is that I'm going to get a job. But I flew back to the UK, and all of a sudden I had I mean, again, there was a part in Rogue One, which was the part of Sergeant Melshi. And yeah, honestly, I can't really explain how fast and how quick and how bizarre it all happened. It just happened, and I didn't have any time to think about it. I didn't have any time to worry about it, and no point at all was I sat there thinking, here I am, speaking in a Star Wars movie. It just happened, and afterwards, I carried on. And then when it came out, I remember going to see it, and I still couldn't process it, Marcus. And I remember going to see it at the cinema with my mother, and she shouted at me for eating sweeties. Duncan, would you stop eating them sweeties? That's what she said. I had chocolate buttons, right? But I hadn't opened them, and so she was Duncan, be quiet. She was obviously, that's my mother, love her as I do, making more noise than anyone else in the cinema, telling me to be quiet. But it was actually the people that were sat in front of me that were eating the sweeties. Oh. And I intimated this to my mother, and she looked at me and I said, would you like me to tap them on the shoulder and tell them to be quiet? No, she said, no, just leave them alone. So that's my mother, quite happy to tell me off, but if it's someone else, then she doesn't want to get involved. So, the whole thing's surreal from the beginning, and even now as Andor has come on, even that was the same kind of level of I still can't even process that. Just out of the blue, my agent called, and this would be back in early 2020, and she called me, and she said, Nina's office, so Nina Gold, who cast Andor, they had been in touch, and they were checking my availability for later in 2020 for Andor. Now, I didn't know this at the time. I should probably pay more attention to things, but Tony Gilroy had come on board to be the showrunner. And when my agent called, she said, Nina's office say you should give Tony a call and just try and have a catch up with him and see what's going on. And yeah, I sent him a text message, and he called 30 seconds later, and he was telling me all about the show, and I'm going to be in it, and I can't process it. He's talking and he's telling me all of the story about the prison and about Melshi and what's going to happen, and it's the best. What it feels like is, when you have those dreams and something amazing happens, like you've won the lottery or something brilliant, and then you wake up and you have been experiencing this emotion of oh my God, that's it, I've won, there's never anything to worry about ever again. And then you wake up.
Yeah.
And that's how this whole role of Melshi and Rogue One and Andor has felt to me. It's felt to me as if at any moment I'm going to have one of those moments of waking up, and I'll let it roll over and be like, oh my God, I dreamt I was in Rogue One and Andor, and they were just calling me up and telling me about the stories. And, that's how it happened for me. It happened for me in a way that I cannot naturally process or fathom. That's why I say it's mystical. And the first conversation, was about Buddhism. It was all about chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. That was pretty much our first discussion. And as I told you the last time we spoke, I've been practicing this for 13 years, and I got to the point where I stopped being blown away by these astonishing things that would happen, because that has come to be the process of my life, of not at any moment knowing what's going to come next, but when it comes, it's almost greater than you could have possibly imagined. And that's the one thing that they often say is, you know, don't fight too much with the universe, because the universe might have far grander plans for you than you could have possibly imagined for your tiny little self, you know. And that's, you know, if you'd have told me 13 years ago, you know, when I started that practice, that you know, I would be sat here chatting to you about, you know, Andor and Rogue One, I could never have imagined it to be doing something that's so vast and so popular and such a part of so many people's consciousness.
ScotsCare, supporting Scots away from home in London.
The set's huge. 200 named cast members, 6,000 supporting artists. Where was it filmed, Duncan, and what did it feel like that when you went onto the set? Did you think this is, I know it's emotionally massive, but does it feel physically massive?
Yeah, well, you know, we started filming off the back of the second lockdown, you know, in the UK. So I think the plans had been to film in places like Gran Canaria and you know, the production, they had to change everything. The pandemic meant everything changed. You know, we filmed in Blackpool. That was my first day. Yeah, my first day was filming. Again, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it for people that haven't seen it. But yeah, the first thing I shot was the scene on the beach with Diego, and that was in Blackpool, and it was freezing cold, and I went from Blackpool, which is, and I had these, it was so bizarre, these kind of mystic connections that I would have when I was filming, you know, and a lot of it was attached to, well, my sister Lindsay, you know. I remember I was walking one day, I went off to get myself a coffee, and I was walking along the seafront in Blackpool, and I had one of the most, you know, when you have these vivid recollections of something, and I had this, it was like an explosion of memory of walking down there with my mom and my dad and my sister Lindsay, and it overwhelmed me. I kind of, my knees buckled a wee bit, and I remember going back to the hotel and calling Mum and saying to her, listen, I've just had this really weird thing happen. This is what I experienced. And she said to me, that's what was happening. Now, I was just probably at that time, my mum said, she said, you would have been maybe 6 or 7 years old. She says, how could you possibly remember it? But it was like you know, a huge remembrance of something from before. And then when we went to film more of the stuff in episode 11, it was filmed in a quarry near Matlock. Oh. Now, Matlock is where I lived when my sister Lindsay was born. And I remember getting driven to the set, and of course I would have been in the back of a car as an infant, you know, like so I'm about a year and a half older than Lindsay. So I would have been in a child seat.
Yeah.
But as I was getting driven to set, it was like I was having memories that didn't belong to me, but did belong to me. And I remember saying to my mum, I said, look, I had that strange thing in Blackpool, and now we're going to Matlock. She says, what do you remember about Matlock? And I said, you know, the one thing I remember about Matlock is Gulliver's Kingdom. And of course, the hotel was right next to Gulliver's Kingdom. So that was the location stuff, which was meant to, you know, which they, as I say, the production, to do this in a pandemic, the scale and the size of it, to have to change their plans for locations. I can't even begin to imagine how difficult it must have been. And then, you know, all of the prison sequences we filmed at Pinewood, and that was, yeah, that was when you really started to realize what it was you were a part of. The sets for those prison sequences were like nothing you could imagine. Well, you've seen it,
Yeah.
but to walk onto it, you know, they built those sets. They were enormous.
The kind of they're quite overwhelming in their own right. They're windowless. I couldn't decide whether it was like a laboratory or a prison or an asylum, and the starkness of it, and all these white lights along the floor. And then there was again going back to the kind of darkness of Andor, the fact that the floors were electrified. So this was a kind of cruelty that we hadn't seen in Star Wars before.
Yeah, and I think that was when Tony first called me up to tell me about it, that was something that he really was because look, all of a sudden we're getting to see the machinations of the Empire. You know, we're getting to see the kind of facilities they were putting people into and never letting them out of. And that first scene when Cassian turns up and the guy says, this might be the last breath of fresh air you ever have. And then they press the floor and they electrocute everyone. Wow, when Tony was telling me about this on the phone, he was so he was saying it's a nightmare. He was saying this is like nothing you're ever going to have seen before in Star Wars. It's a terrifying place with. I mean, can you imagine the mind of the people that have gone, hey, listen, I've got a great idea for this prison. We'll turn it into like a work facility, and we'll have the floors all tungsten steel, and there'll be no guards, and we'll need no weapons, and we can just electrocute people if they don't do what they're told. But not even if they don't do what they're told. If they don't work hard enough, the losing shift is going to get they're going to get electrocuted, fried, and the winners, the shift at the top, are going to get flavor in their food. It's a nightmare of a facility.
It takes it away from the almost comic book feel of Star Wars and moves it more into almost Shawshank Redemption territory, where you kind of think this is real punishment in space. And the machines you were working on, they all look phenomenally real, and you were all in sync, moving together, building the parts. Was that as real as it looked?
Yes. Yeah, that was, we were in there rehearsing those scenes. We had days in there where we would be rehearsing how things got put together. And everything worked, these were working machinery. So they had been built by the art department, and we had guys in there that were operating all of the hydraulics of the machinery. There was a very specific way that things were put together. It was meant, because these people have been in there for some of them years. It was meant to run like a well-oiled machine, and so of course they had to get us in there, who are actors, to go through this process in this way where it's second nature, and also be able to have conversations on top of it. So it was, to be in there with Toby, the director, and everybody that was involved, the way they had it set up, the thought that went into it, the efforts of everyone, and of course it always then everybody's brilliant efforts, and then you're relying on a group of actors to follow the instructions. But I was blessed as well to be working with not just Diego and Andy, but Joseph and Tom and Brian and Clemens and Christopher, the people that were on table 5 with me, they were all brilliant. They were all super focused, and all of them were making sure. And it was great because, as we found our own way, we found our own rhythm, and we really, we were there filming that for almost 2 months. So every day going in there, it really affects you, because, and as well for being in the middle of the pandemic, we were COVID tested, every other day, and the restrictions and the rules, everything that was in place. It was kind of like being in a prison,
by the end of it. Total immersion into what you were doing.
Yeah, it was. And do you know what? I think that probably helped.
Yeah, I'll bet. And then there's this beautiful reveal, which, I'm a Star Wars geek, but when I realized what you were building, you kind of go, oh, and I don't know, can you say it? Because if you've not watched...
I don't know what we were building. I don't know anything about that.
You go, oh my, this just pulled everything together beautifully. And yeah, that just... So working alongside Diego Luna. Now, I first discovered him in Narcos. And I think the thing with Diego Luna, he's got such a kind face. You look at him and he looks as if, oh, I could have a cup of coffee with you. You look like a really good bloke. But in Narcos, he was able to swap that and play quite an evil character when he needed to. So he is an actor of some complexity.
Yeah, and substance. And I think, Diego is one of the most generous actors that I've ever worked with. He's involved with, he exec this as well, Andor, but he was just involved with all of it. He was every day chatting with anybody that wanted to chat to him, as well as staying super focused and thinking about the story and thinking about the everything, the stuff that he was taking on board, as well as being in, I think, the workload that he had on Andor. And I think in the evenings he was editing a show he was doing for Netflix. Oh, wow. So the amount of work that you had to do, never mind anything else, you could, if you were a particular sort of human being, be consumed by that and really have to find no other time for other people, on a set. And I have worked in the past with actors where, they're maybe not so beautifully human as you would hope they would be, but Diego was. He was, from the get-go, made everybody feel a part of what we were doing. And wow, the character Andor is Cassian, is his process in that prison, I feel, is as he starts to lead people from all different walks of life, and Diego was like that as well. He was a real leader on set, a real team player, and wow, he's great at what he does. And when I sit and watch it back and see it, it's only when I get to see it and know what's gone into it that I see the subtlety in so much of his work.
Well, it's interesting. We said that earlier. The nuance is filled with nuance, but then of course, and I'm not saying Andy Serkis's performance is not filled with nuance, but he, that's a powerhouse performance. And I found him genuinely scary at points. And I was thinking about you when I was watching him and the interactions. I was thinking, does that make it easier as an actor when you're working across from somebody with such ability and commitment?
Yeah, well, I think, again, it's been, I was blessed on this job because Andy Serkis is also one of the nicest human beings that I've ever worked with. He's so kind and friendly and interested. And I know that's a thing that we'd expect human beings to be, because, like I said before, we're all going to die, so we might as well be nice to each other. But that's not always the case. And yeah, Andy and I, we had our kind of makeup calls together, and he was just so open to conversation, and you know, there's a few bits there where, you know, we have a few quite physical interactions, and he's a strong man, Andy Serkis. You know, he's a rock climber, and yeah, he's a very, very strong human being. I wore the scars of some of those for days afterwards, but it's this thing of there was nothing apart from let's work together to make this as good and as real as we can. And then it would be super, super high intensity, and then they would call cut, and there would be a smile and a laugh and a joke and back to humanity. The switch of people from going from just, you know, chatting away to this intense, frightening characters, and then afterwards the kind of smile, the speed at which you know, that, and I think that's when you know you're working with, you know, people at the top end of their game, because they can switch it on and off. Their focus, and again, Andy too. I learned a lot from Andy and Diego, because the effort that they put in to every scene, every thought, they're always thinking, and as well, always busy, you know, the next thing, create, and you know, I said that to Andy at one point. We were having a chat, and it was like, man, you know, I'm eating my lunch and you're working, you know. I said, it seems like such a huge workload that you throw. And he said to me, he said, well, you play your guitar all afternoon. He says, and so I think that would take a lot of effort as well. I said, yeah, I guess. And he said that the workload's the same. If you want to be a success at something, you have to make effort.
Yeah.
And these are guys that have been doing it at the top end of the business for many, many years. And they continue to work as if they're just trying to make it. And that was a big, big lesson for me.
Yeah. And then inevitably the end. And I thought, you know, that the end for me was beautiful and sad. And I thought, and I actually looked this up. I thought, I've got to think of something smart to say here. And I tried to look up what a word for beautiful and sad was. And the only word I could find was pulchritudinous. And I thought, I've not a clue what that means. I'm just look like a dick if I use that word. Yeah, that's not a word I use. But it came full circle for me, because the escape comes and the elation, you had won this victory. And then all I was reminded of was what was to come in Scarif at the end of Rogue One. And I was devastated all over again. It's just a show that played with my emotions in every single episode, right to the credits.
It's do you know what I'm blown away by here? I asked, so the guy that lives downstairs from me, I'll come back to your question in a second, but I'm amazed at what you've just said to me. I asked him how things were, and I said, how's this new girl that you've met? And he put, man, she's pulchritudinous. He actually texted me that.
No, he did not.
He did. Look, you can see it. Hang on, you see it?
Oh yeah, pulchritudinous. Oh man, she is pulchritudinous.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I had to go and Google it to see what
who uses words like that.
Yeah, but it's that to me is like I told you before, the synchronicity of things. So the fact that you've just said that,
that's strange.
That's the mystic thing that I'm talking about of being a part of this show, that you would say that someone would text that to me just the other day. And they say in indigenous and shamanic based cultures that synchronicities are signs that your life is on the right path. And yeah, the show itself is, well, like you say, it reminded you of what's to come, and you have these beautiful moments, and they're followed by these moments of devastation, and so that again is another a keen signal that what you're painting is a picture of life, because that's life for me. Amazing things happen, the most beautiful things happen, and then awful things happen, and it feels like it can't get any worse than it is, and then it does, and then it gets beautiful again. And I often say to people when they come, and we sometimes run meditation retreats, and I say to them in a moment of levity, that's what life is. Good things happen, bad things happen, good things happen, bad things happen, good things happen again, and then we die.
You're so stoic. That's the third time you've mentioned death, Duncan.
Well, do you know the one of the founding members of the founding presidents, or the second president of the Soka Gakkai International, which is a lay organization of Buddhism. The second president was a man called Josai Toda, and he said, "Make the first thing you study death." Make that your first point of study as a human being. And it might not be that you can't understand it, but try, make efforts, because an understanding of death brings about a great color to life.
Yeah.
And then he says, and once you think you understand, or you have a grasp of just the nature of it, then study everything else. So I'm trying to do both, but it's I think these whatever, it is the third time I've mentioned it, and I only now I noticed that I've said it because you've said it, and I've been on this job and out here in Malta, and of course, when I meet some of the actors to begin with, I think they all think, "Oh, who's this guy? It's a bit weird. He's a bit intense and he's a bit weird." And he talks about stuff without without the same, what's the word? You know how some people tiptoe around things that they think, well, this is quite, it's not really taboo, it is taboo, sorry, to be talking about these things. But I'll go right into it. I'm quite happy to talk about it. I think we should all talk more about the things that we are fearful or uncomfortable with.
It's what binds us, I reckon. Failure, shame, all these things. It's what we are. But listen, thank you for joining us again. Have a superb Christmas. Are you back for Christmas?
So yeah, I get home on December the 11th. I'm having I have the family round for Christmas this year.
Brilliant.
My sister and her 2 kids and her fiance and my mom and my stepdad. So
lovely.
It should be chaos.
And I hope Andor keeps on creeping up in the tomato meter. Yes.
Well, if it gets any higher, what are we going to do? Yeah, no, super stoked. It's amazing. Thank you for having me.
ScotsCare, supporting London Scots with financial grants, welfare advice, counselling, sheltered housing, jobs coaching and family support.